Spider-Man has had some pretty epic villains and a few lame ones.
Maybe more than a few. Marvel loves creating weird and wacky villains, and Spidey has had his fair share of weirdos. Frogman is Eugene Petilio. There was a time when he took his frog suit and he tried to take on some of the hardest hitting street level Marvel heroes. More than once did he come face to face with Spidey, and every time he was taken into the dirt almost immediately. And it's not hard to figure out why. The guy built a suit where the only power was how high he could jump. Like, if you're going to get your powers from some sort of accident or you're born with them, then you don't have a choice. You have to stick with whatever your weird power is. That's your life. But if you're building a power, then you can be whoever you want. Why would you choose frogs? There are so many other creatures you could go with. Like the Falcon. Even though he's not the coolest hero of all time, he's a million times cooler than the dude who hops around and tries to cause some havoc. On the bright side, Eugene's son eventually takes on the mantle of the frog suit and tries to be a hero, but on the downside, Eugene's son sucks at being a hero as much as his dad sucks at being a villain. So in the end, the family was doomed to be on the sidelines. I would like to see one of those what if comics where Frogman becomes the greatest hero of all time.
Hey guys, if you like these videos and you want to see some more, make sure you hit that like button. Number 9, the Trapster. His name is Peter Petruski, and I can't believe how long he's been around. Marvel has him come back again and again, despite the fact that he's got no powers other than this weird paste gun. He invented a super adhesive liquid paste and loves using it for evil. He's redesigned his costume multiple times, always ridiculous and far too proud of himself, but he has definitely been around. He appears in multiple stories and has gone up against the likes of Daredevil, Fantastic Four, and of course Spider-Man. All with just a goo gun. He is hired by Red Skull at one point and even has a run-in with Ghost Rider. His paste was once confused for Spider-Man's webbing, and Trapster was furious to see Spidey getting credit in the newspaper for his crimes. Trapster is undeniably lame, but he's obviously got some fans because he's been around so long, so we'll leave him here at number 9. Lame, but not the worst.
And coming in at number 8, we have Stegron, the Dinosaur Man. Once again, if you get to pick your powers, maybe you should shoot a little higher than being a species that already went extinct. They already lost the battle with nature. You think they will be able to take down superheroes? Stegron was originally Dr. Vincent Stegron. He was a scientist who took a liking to the serum which turned Kirk Connors into the Lizard Man, and he decided he would up the ante a little bit. He mixed the formula with dinosaur DNA and then shot it all up inside his body and turned into a dinosaur-human hybrid. He then went on to try and make an army of dinosaurs to try and take over the world, but was taken down by a force he didn't expect. It was winter. Dinosaurs are cold-blooded apparently, so when winter came around, they all went to sleep, including Stegron. If you're picking your superpower, you should go with something that can handle temperatures below 10 degrees Celsius. Unless you're in Florida or something. If you're down there, you can build the biggest dinosaur army you want, and the state would probably be fine with it.
Number 7, Slyde. This guy was a chemical engineer who created a chemical coating that eliminated all friction between that object and surfaces. He's like the opposite of Trapster. He invented the ultimate lubricant. Then this evil tycoon buys up the company that he works for and shuts down the lab. Slyde, aka Jerome Beecher, was going to build his own company founded on the non-stick solution he invented, but no bank was willing to give him a loan. So he did what anybody would do and decides to rob the bank. He makes himself a costume out of this material and, free from the clutches of friction, is able to zip around skating on the ground up to 30 miles per hour and can't be stopped, not by people's grabbing hands or even Spider-Man's sticky webbing. Now, this isn't exactly the most lame villain, but the idea of this slippery criminal sliding all over the place just doesn't really do it for me. Where's the stakes? Spidey could just wait for this guy to slip and fall off of a cliff or into oncoming traffic, or they could just have him slip and slide right into a jail cell. I'll say one thing, the way that he zips all over the place in the comic panels looks like a lot of fun. Number 6, the Walrus. With big wet flippers and menacing tusks and the blood-curdling cries of "Arf, arf," it's easy to see how terrifying a walrus-based supervillain could be. This guy is not. Hubert Carpenter was created when his uncle, a janitor, tried again and again to give Hubert powers. They exhausted the names of animals he could have the proportionate strength of all the way through the alphabet till they got to the letter W. He was totally stumped and then became inspired by a poster of the Beatles and becomes the Walrus. He goes on a classic spree of mass destruction. eventually seeing Beast lecturing at a university and decides to attack him to prove that he's the greatest product of modern science. Hilariously enough, it's actually Frogman who gets the credit for taking him down later, and this really gets the blubber boiling. Spider-Man can't help laughing when he meets this guy and winds up taking him down for the second time with just a tap of his finger.
Coming in number 5, we have Typeface. You know what everyone loves? Signage! So why don't you make your persona based off that? I'm sure that will pull in a ton of people and you'll become one of the most famous supervillains of all time. No way, man, signage is super lame. Well, Typeface, also known as Gordon Thomas, didn't think so, and he had a pretty good foundation. He was a Vietnam War vet who was skilled in hand-to-hand combat, military tactics, and all sorts of weapons. He even beat Spider-Man in their first encounter. If this guy changed his theme to anything other than signage, he probably would have been pretty cool. But the reason that he did this was because when Thomas came back from war, his life fell apart and he ended up getting a job at a sign shop, and it was the only time in his life where he ever felt happy. When the place was bought out, he lost his job, and this was his inspiration to become a villain. Luckily, he eventually switched sides and becomes a hero. If you're gonna get an F on your character, you might as well be on the side of good.
Number 4, The Spot. This guy is something else. Some people think his powers are pretty cool and others hate him, but he definitely belongs on this list. Spider-Man himself bursts into tears laughing upon meeting this guy, and looking like a Dalmatian, it's pretty easy to see why. He's all white, covered in black spots that function as two-way portals. That's pretty much his main thing. He takes the spots and he chucks them around and uses them like portals like this is Looney Tunes, messing around with Spider-Man and even making him punch himself in the face. If this guy doesn't sound lame enough already, the more portals that he throws around, the less spots that he has on his body, making himself more vulnerable. He got these powers after being exposed to the spotted dimension, and the spots can even be suspended in mid-air. It's honestly a pretty cool concept, but the villain himself is just too lame to make it work for me.
And coming in number 3, we have Spider-Side, like genocide but performed by a spider. Yeah, that is not the best writing I've ever heard of in my life. Spider-Side was birthed out of the Clone Saga, which is considered one of the worst sagas in comic history. So any villain to come out of it is probably never going to see the light of day again unless they're used as a joke. Spider-Side is a clone of Spider-Man that has the ability to regenerate from what seems to be any accident. He was convinced at first that he was the real Peter Parker, but then he found out that he was just a freak. Such is the plight of most clones. When you read his character on paper, it sounds super cool. He has the powers of Spider-Man with some of the most deadly features of the Terminator, but the character was used in such a horrible fashion that it became a laughingstock before it ever got its time to shine. Maybe in the future we'll see someone use this character to its full ability.
Number 2, Plant Man. In Strange Tales number 113 from 1963, we meet the mysterious Plant Man. This gardener turned professional criminal was born in London and orphaned at a young age. When he left the orphanage, he became lab assistant to a well-known botanist who was studying the low-level mental activity of plant life. Unfortunately, this guy fired him for focusing too much on this invention he was making and not gardening for him. One day, lightning strikes his plant ray gun that he's been working on, and it becomes imbued with the power to control and animate plant life. Ooh. So he then makes a disguise and sets out to get his revenge for being fired by framing his boss for robbery. The plant life isn't the only thing with low-level mental activity, as this guy made from leaves somehow thinks that he can take on the Human Torch. He is later quickly defeated and his ray gun is destroyed, although I'm sad to say he does appear again in 2002.
And coming at the number 1 spot, we have Big Wheel. This villain's theme is a massive wheel that he rides around and it has guns on it. Reading some of these is like watching a breakdown of a group of YouTubers trying to find out what they need to do so they can set their channel apart from everyone else. Like, maybe if I was the wheel guy, then people would like my content. Well, Big Wheel's just an ordinary guy until the Tinkerer gave him something that was probably a prank, a massive wheel that could ride around and had guns on it. You think something like that would be extremely hard to control, and you would be right. Big Wheel would die when he lost control of his massive wheel car thing and fell into a river and drowned. Here's a lesson for any future villain. If you want to pick a gimmick that is going to set you apart from the rest, before you make a hard decision and invest in a giant wheel that will get you killed and make you look like a fool, you should probably hire a think tank to come up with a better idea. Like I said earlier on in this list, you can pick whatever power you want when you're building it from scratch, so why go with wheels?
Number 10, Batman Who Laughs. Look, I love Batman Who Laughs as much as the next person. It's a really cool concept for a character, but honestly, he's a character who's simply been overdone at this point. Batman Who Laughs being the most deadly villain out there because he's a combo of the Joker and Batman seems like, I don't know, a bit much when you put him on the level of multiversal threat that he became. I could understand Earth level threat, maybe even a universal threat, but multiversal? Whew, that was pushing it a bit far. Granted, at least he went to that great height and then has since had some time to kind of cool off, dying during Dark Knight's death metal in 2021. But I have no doubt that at some point, he will return, via some kind of weird resurrection plot, no doubt. And I mean, honestly, I'd be fine with it. I just need a couple more years off and then I'll be ready. But for now, I need a break still. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love when we talk Batman, I personally love talking Batman, one of my favorite superheroes still of all time, be sure to check out our Batman playlist where we have tons more Batman content for you. Number 9, the Riddler. He's a guy that loves riddles. And well, that's kinda it. I mean, I guess Edward Nygma has also often been painted as a genius in the comics. He is a genius, so he does have that going for him. But Batman himself has, also been known to be attributed as a genius. And often it's the Riddler's own gimmick, his penchant and honest obsession for riddles, that makes him both interesting, but at the same time is often his weakness or his hubris. So while I do love him as a character, I sometimes think we play him up to be more of a threat than he really is, considering that he's just a really smart dude who really loves riddles. Like many others in Batman's rogues gallery, he doesn't have any superpowers, and in Riddler's case, he isn't even as fit as many others are. And when it comes to even the one thing he does have, his smarts, Batman is still able to often outsmart him. Number 8, Ra's al Ghul. I didn't want to put Raish on here, but there are simply too many people online that seem to find him overdone, and not quite as deep as they would like. That's right, Ra's al Ghul, often touted as one of Batman's ultimate foes, is according to some, kinda boring. I guess, to be fair, I do find Talia to be a more interesting villain and leader of the League of Assassins than her dad was. Sorry, Raish. Number 7, Bane. Despite being a really complex villain, Bane ends up often feeling kinda one note. He's insanely intelligent and well read, but often his on display oversized muscles overshadow the complex inner workings of what the character could be. Usually because Bane is so big of a character both physically but also in terms of his presence. He ends up getting big moments and even big victories over Batman, like when he completely defeated him by breaking his back in Nightfall, but when it comes to Bane as a recurring villain having as much consistency and staying power as some others, like Ra's or Joker, Bane, he struggles. And so while his big moments are definitely something that we love to see and that are super memorable, it's during those in-between moments that we really see how overrated he can be as a Batman villain. I just want to see more of Bane the intellect. If you have a Bane intellect story for me, recommend it in the comments. I want to read it. Number 6, Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn is one of the most overrated, but we all still love her. Like so many on this list, this is in fact why she makes her cut, because she is so beloved, too beloved some might say. Harley Quinn started out as the girlfriend of the Joker, who was really only intended to play a small role in the Batman animated series, but she became so popular they decided to give her more of a role and more to do. In fact, in the animated series, she almost single-handedly defeated Batman herself after capturing him. It is only through Batman manipulating Harley's mind, twisting the knife of self-doubt that was clearly already placed there by her unstable and unhealthy relationship with the Joker and her own self-esteem issues, the Batman was able to escape. You'd actually think with Harley having been a psychiatrist herself, she might have picked up on what he was doing. But ultimately, that is how Batman gets away. Still, Harley manages to capture and almost defeat Batman all on her own. However, it has often become a trope that Harley can do almost anything in the comics, with her popularity rather than her demonstration of her very real skills and abilities, often acting as her true superpower. We just let her do stuff because we love her. Granted, once again, it also depends on who's writing her, but it's an easy trap that many seem to fall into, at least from time to time, so yeah. Number 5. Punchline. Now if we're talking overrated villains, if Harley is making the cut, there's no way I'm not including the Joker's newest female partner in crime, Alexis K, aka Punchline. A lot of people have dubbed Punchline Harley Quinn 2.0, a younger and to some, hotter new version of Joker's girlfriend and accomplice. Although admittedly, Punchline would actually be pretty offended to hear people say this herself. She does not advertise as Joker's girlfriend, and they have both seemed to deny a romantic relationship between them. She's like, no, I'm not dating him. We're just working together. Instead, Alexis sees herself as the Joker's new protege, someone who is wise to his tricks and believes she is different from Harley Quinn because she's more in charge of what she wants, instead of being manipulated and brainwashed by the Joker as Harley was. At least, that is Alexis's own take. However, others out there see things a little differently, Harley included. But namely, we're talking about here, the fans. Many of whom were actually shocked when Punchline got the upper hand in a fight against Harley Quinn, who is much more established. I think we all think that Punchline is a cool concept and definitely has a cool design, but at the end of the day, it feels like she's advancing a little too fast in her criminal career and is ultimately being inflated when it comes to her power levels as a new character. She hasn't earned her rep yet. It feels like she was just kind of like hand gifted that, so that's why she's a bit overrated. Number 4. Hush. Hush is a villain who really is just kind of ridiculous, to be honest. The implication initially that he might be Jason Todd was interesting, and then we learned that he was actually Batman's old friend turned foe, Thomas Elliot. This also had the potential to be intriguing, because, you know, we could learn a lot more about younger Bruce and things in his life, and Thomas, and how they could be a foil for each other. However, I would say that Hush ended up being kind of just a lesser Ghostmaker, and yes, I do say that knowing that the name Ghostmaker sounds kind of ridiculous. Initially, I was not a Ghostmaker fan, but I gotta say, I just feel like Ghostmaker did it better and has more potential to reappear as a rival of Batman's as opposed to just like a straight up villain. Hush had a lot of promise but didn't end up delivering, which is also likely why we almost never see him featured in stories anymore. Number 3. Victor Zsasz. Victor Zsasz is unhinged, I'll give you that, but ultimately he's just a man, usually with a knife. I've seen versions of this character that made him seem almost superhuman when it came to his fighting skill, his strength, his abilities, but really, Zsasz, in terms of his comic book origin, he's like just a guy that really loves to kill, which is definitely super scary, but at the same time, just a guy. Really, Batman should almost always be able to take down Zsasz easily, considering all of Batman's training in comparison to Victor's. Now granted, I will admit that I love Anthony Carrigan, which is why I'm willing to take it a little easier on this character and not put him so high up. I don't believe he's been overdone necessarily, I just think at a base level he really isn't that powerful, and it would be hard for him to keep up with Batman on paper, and yet he sometimes still does that anyways. Times where he looks like he has super strength, I'm like, okay, this is just Victor Zsasz, let's calm down. Number 2. Firefly. While Firefly doesn't get a lot of love when it comes to his presence in the comics, this could be because he's very one note. Who is he? Well, it depends on the continuity, but usually he's Ted Carson. What does he do? He likes to set things on fire, so that's what he does. Also, he has a jetpack, so he can fly. Get it? Fire. Fly. Firefly. Get it? Number 1. Joker. The Joker is probably the most overrated villain of the lot. Now don't get me wrong, he makes for a great foil to Batman in terms of his characterization, but at the same time he's not anything special in terms of his power set or anything like that. And honestly, there's way too much Joker content. Like, I need a break. I'm losing my mind. That's why I had to rank him so high on this list, and I feel like everyone's gonna agree with me. I mean, if you don't agree with me, state your case in the comments. I'd love to hear it, but yeah. Also, when it comes to the Joker, we've just gotten so much Joker content. I think I just have Joker fatigue. I feel like every time I turn around, there's a new Joker series waiting to look me in the eye, or a new film featuring him. Even Matt Reeves' The Batman teased the Joker at the end, when I don't really think it needed to. It had a really cool version of the Riddler, but yeah, sure, let's tease the Joker. Sure, I was intrigued like most people when it came to his appearance there, but at the same time, I did feel like it was unnecessary. Not every Batman film or franchise needs to have the Joker in it, and the fact that so many people love the Joker so much kinda makes me concerned for us as a society.
In its end, Captain Cold. Leonard Snart was raised by an father and took refuge with his grandfather, who worked in an ice truck. When his grandfather died, Snart grew tired of his father's set out to start a criminal career because that's a healthy coping mechanism. Snark joined up with a group of small-time thieves in planning out a robbery, and he was issued a gun with a visor to protect his eyes against the flash. But I mean like the flash of the gun, not the flash as in the superhero. But this visor design would later be adapted into his trademark costume. In recent years, he's like added like a radio receiver to it, and you can pick up police traffic or like police radio with it. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, look, I'm sorry. I know that a whole bunch of people love Captain Cold, but okay? When he decided to go solo, and like, yeah, he's really smart about it, but like, he shouldn't be able to hold his own against the Flash. He shouldn't. I'm sorry. Like, I get that he has a cold gun, and like, cold is the opposite of fast because it slows molecules down or whatever the hell the explanation was. But come on. Like, sure, you shattered Johnny Quick's leg, but if I am faster than a frickin' bullet, I'm gonna be faster than a cold flame. Alright, I am. That's just how it works. That's normal. Sorry. 8 and 9, Cobalt Blue. While in the comics, Malcolm Thawne is the lost twin brother of Barry Allen, in the show, that's not really the same thing. In the Arrowverse, Cobalt Blue is Eddie Thawne, who is brought back by the Negative Speed Force in order to make him their avatar. To erase Reverse Flash from the timeline, Eddie shoots himself in the heart in the end of Season 1, since he's a direct ancestor of Reverse Flash. But his death created a paradox, since Eddie didn't leave behind any children to continue the Thawne name like he was supposed to. So Eobard Thawne is never born, but he still keeps showing up in the goddamn show. The paradox also created a wormhole that opened and started expanding, pulling Eddie's body to it, and then like it was supposed to swallow up Central City. But this wormhole actually sent him to 2049, where Eddie was then resurrected by the Negative Speed Force. He originally worked as a scientist at Mercury Labs known as Malcolm Gilmore until he was struck by a red lightning bolt from the Negative Speed Force. But the way that his storyline ends, series finale spoilers for The Flash by the way, is that Barry convinces him to let go of the hate, but still stay the Negative Speed Force avatar. Yeah, they have a climactic battle with all the speedster villains of seasons past that lasts like a minute, and then they all disappear, and then they just shake hands at the end. So yeah, I'm gonna say Cobalt Blue, even though we were all waiting for it, is kind of overrated when it comes to the show. And at 8, Gorilla Grodd. Gorilla Grodd is a Flash rogue from Africa's Gorilla City. The original Grodd, which debuted in DC Comics in 1959, was a telepath who could control other animals and had a form of mind control as well over humans. In the New 52, all inhabitants of Gorilla City had accelerated mental attributes due to the Speed Force, but Grodd was still the superior member of their species. On The Flash in the CW, Grodd is a very intelligent gorilla experimented on by Star Labs to try to create a super soldier for the US government. However, the and unethical treatment caused him to grow angry and evil, and he escaped seeking vengeance. Grodd has powerful mind control powers on top of superhuman strength and enhanced intellect, and at one point even combined with the Flash to be a psychopathic, telepathic gorilla with super speed. So I mean, like, we should be scared of him. Like, yeah, that makes sense, and his pop figure's pretty cool. But other than that, I get that like he's a telepathic gorilla, but it's still super speed. You shouldn't really have to worry when it's super speed. How are you able to control my mind if it's able to move at super speed? I'm gonna say that every single damn time. And at 7, Weather Wizard. Barry was struck by lightning. Why does weather have any impact on this man? Meteorological Man, known as the Weather Wizard, was a menace to both Barry Allen and Wally West's versions of the Flash, and one of the most overpowered super criminals that they ever faced in the comics. First appearing in 1959's The Flash number 110, criminal Mark Martin armed himself with the Weather Wand, which was an advanced piece of technology which could control eolic energy. Martin took the wand from his deceased brother, who was a scientist who never intended on that object to leave the lab, but with some modifications it became a weapon for, you know, criminals. At full power, the wand could summon lightning storms, rain clouds, or change the weather entirely, which I don't know why it's listed separate from summoning lightning storms, but oh well. And whatever the weather, Martin could use his mighty powers to rob banks and cause mass panic, kind of like the world's weirdest postman. A later reimagining of the Weather Wizard would see him actually just granted metahuman abilities and lets him control the weather without using the wand, and he's He's also appeared on the Flash TV show as one of the metahumans created by the particle accelerator, which also gave Barry his powers. However, in the show there are two versions, one appearing in the first episode that Joe West kills, and then a second who appears in episode 16 of that same season, both of them being the Martin brothers, Clyde being the first and Mark being the second. But still, again, he has super speed. Why should I be scared of rain? Why should I be scared of rain? Oh no, you're gonna shoot lightning at me? I have super speed, I'm going to go around it. It just doesn't make sense. Come on, give me something to chew on. And at 6, Rainbow Raider. The reason that the good guys are good is because of their morals, okay? Because they have, they channel their anger into something positive, because they can control themselves. But what happens when a hero with powers like Superman is filled with white hot rage? Okay, well, I mean, we saw it in Injustice, but someone able to cause these emotions, such as Rainbow Raider, makes them pretty damn powerful sometimes. Rainbow Raider's powers are derived entirely from the special goggles that he wears, which allows him to project solid beams of rainbow colored light that he can use offensively or for a travel as a slide. It's kind of stupid the way he does it, but oh well. But in addition, he can coat people in certain colors of light to induce certain emotions. There have also been the Rainbow Raiders, which was a team of supervillains that all had specific color themes that had powers based on their color of the rainbow. But still, just the ability to induce emotion by covering someone in light is enough to make Roy G. Biv pretty kind of scary, but I mean, also, it's super speed. Again, if he has to eat like 1,000,000 tacos over the course of a month to be able to maintain his metabolism and his body, I feel like, oh no, I'm angry. Oh, now I'm not, because, I have super speed and it just wore off. Come on, right? Am I right? I feel like I'm right. Is it just me? How am I doing at number 5? Godspeed. August Hart is the former detective partner of Barry Allen. Okay, August was the only witness to Barry's accident, and while going after a criminal organization called the Black Hole, August was struck by lightning during a Speed Force storm in Central City. August then became the ruthless vigilante known as Godspeed and got his revenge on those he suspected to have killed his brother. He had given up justice since, his killer's brother had gotten free, and, all the things that an evil speedster ends up doing. But I mean, for someone that calls themselves Godspeed, you ain't moving at the speed of gods, alright? I'm just saying. You can keep scrolling, I'm riffing now. It's kinda dumb, alright? If you're gonna call yourself Godspeed, at least make sure that you're actually very, very fast, not just very, very fast in comparison to a human. Come on, the amount of times that they're oh, I am the god of speed, and they're not, is just sad. And you know what? There's another one that I'm about to talk about. In at 4, Savitar. Don't get me wrong, okay? I love Savitar as a villain, and despite it possibly being controversial, yet brave, I think that the CW took the Future Flash story and made it work for TV. But where I'm thinking that Savitar is overrated is the Flash DCEU movie, okay? I liked the story, the base was there, but it just kind of felt like the Savitar or Dark Flash thing was put in there for merchandising reasons, or because the CW version was so dope, not because it organically fit the story. Yeah, it made sense that he knocks himself out of the Speed Force to be created, the Paradox creation for the CW version, but in the movie we see him once when he's coming back from saving his mom, and then he's never mentioned again until the climax. I liked that he had the metal suit because he kept getting shoved full of the Krypton tech, but come on, I called it. I called that he'd be the other Barry as soon as we saw him the first time, and then as soon as he got that first bit of Krypton tech in his arm, I called the rest. It felt kind of forced. The marketing team said that they needed to advertise a villain for the movie instead of the villain just being the Paradox itself. But yeah, there's a reason that this guy didn't show up in the trailers, because he didn't really show up in the movie either. Getting close to the end, at number 3, Mirror Master. While Mirror Master never seemed like much more than a B-grade supervillain in Flash's Rogues Gallery, his powers at times make him a lot more. Before he became a Flash villain, the second Mirror Master, Evan McCulloch, was an assassin in Scotland who was already pretty formidable, alright? If you're an assassin that hasn't gotten caught, I should say. However, once he got his mirror gun, he became more powerful. Obviously, it's a freaking mirror gun. The mirror gun gives Mirror Master the ability to travel to an alternate dimension by entering and exiting any reflective surface. On top of being a significant pain in Flash's ass, Mirror Master has also fought Animal Man and was someone that gave him all that he could handle. But I mean, in comparison to the Flash, yeah, Animal Man is gonna have a harder time. The CW used the Sam Scudder version and was only like a minor villain, but honestly, being able to travel through mirrors like that, he should have been more powerful. Okay, he trapped the Flash in the mirror dimension, but then they just kind of froze it and he was able to get out. So obviously there's not really any more threat that this guy poses other than being able to get away when you really think about it. So yeah, sorry Mirror Master fans, but dude's kind of lame. But ultimately in number 2, Black Flash. However, there is one speedster that every speedster is scared of, that speedster being the Black Flash. Black Flash is the Grim Reaper of the Speed Force, making his first appearance in The Flash Volume 2, number 138 in 1998. He was seen before the deaths of several speedsters, including Barry Allen, Johnny Quick, and Bart Allen. In essence, not only making him the embodiment of death, but also the speedster omen of death. In the CW Arrowverse, he was Hunter Zolomon after being caught by time wraiths, and was killed in the season 3 finale by Killer Frost when he came after Savitar, since the Paradox was finally catching up with him. In the comics, thanks to the combined efforts of multiple speedsters, including Jesse Quick, Jay Garrick, and Max Mercury, Wally was able to race Black Flash to the end of time, causing death to have no meaning, which didn't matter for long since Barry later returns in the Flash Rebirth, becoming the new Black Flash unknowingly. But like, that doesn't make sense to me personally, okay? Like, how are you able to race death to the end of time and then death has no meaning? If you are at the end of time, the only thing there is death. So how does that work? I mean, he's dope, he looks really cool, but just his rules are what make him stupid. Sorry. And finally, in number 1, Reverse Flash. There you go. That's it. Okay, sure he's the fastest in the show, but he's just annoying. Like, he keeps coming back too much, okay? Let's let some other people shine. We don't need the Reverse Flash every single goddamn time. Every crossover, every finale, every damn instance that there's like, oh, it's an evil Barry, it's not an evil Barry, it's Reverse Flash. So yeah, cut it out and just give us someone else, please, for the love of God.
Coming in at number 10 is Mysterio. I may catch some flack for saying this, but I've never really liked Mysterio. I thought he was really cool as a kid, but that's because I didn't understand that Mysterio's illusions were never really more than visual effects. Mysterio's shtick of using illusions when compared to the rest of Spider-Man's rogues gallery is just simply not that impressive and not that massive of a threat. Even almost every other villain on this list is more intimidating than Mysterio is. It's not surprising his character manages to pass away so much, but it's infuriating that it never matters because it's almost always written off as an illusion just so we can bring the guy back again. The other problem is that after facing the guy a few times, there is no reason Spider-Man should continue to be fooled by Mysterio and his illusions. I'm sorry, he shouldn't. And bouncing off of that, it's important to add that none of these illusions are created by any kind of superpower, which makes some of his illusions make no sense. I will say he did work really well as a member of the Sinister Six, and I think his portrayal in the Spider-Man Far From Home movie was pretty great, but other than that, yeah. Number 9, Rhino. We're going to the hive of scum and villainy known as Reddit here, with one user who spoke on the overratedness of Rhino by saying the villain was not all that deep or complex, but his character concept, design, and powers are so memorable that you just kinda end up liking him anyways. And I mean, yeah, that's really the gist of it. Alexei has kind of always just been the brawn over brains, and even when he has been given growth and even seemed like he might become an anti-hero at one point, it always has been taken away, forgotten, or just led to tragedy for the character anyways. Alexei started as a basic thug with the Russian mafia before having his Rhino armor permanently bonded to his body. Eventually, and over time, he would be able to remove the suit and even have his intelligence increased, both of which led to tragedies that forced him back to his villainy. The Rhino has gotten by on his iconic concept and design, but he either lacks or is refused the real depth of other Spider-Man villains, leaving people to believe Rhino has earned more praise than he deserves as a villain. I just want to see him become an anti-hero. That's all I want, really. Number 8, Chameleon. As the first ever villain to face off against the Wall Crawler, the Chameleon will always have a special place in the hearts of Spider-Man fans. It doesn't change the fact, as a repeating villain who doesn't really change up his MO, the Chameleon's appearances can get a little stale. According to the people of Reddit, again, Chameleon is the most overrated because the nature of his gimmick makes his stories so repetitive. There are only so many times that a dramatic reveal of Chameleon having impersonated someone can truly have its maximum effect. Eventually, the gimmick gets old, leaving some to see Chameleon as overhyped. His connection to other villains, though, does make him kinda cool, and his way of fighting Peter is more psychological than physical, which is also cool. Even if he was the first, he isn't the villain you hear people talk about all the time. Number 7. Judas Traveler. The Clone Saga was rough. That is something a lot of fans agree on. While I'm still a fan because it gave us both Ben Reilly and Kane Parker, I still admit it was rough, and one reason for that was one of its central players, Dr. Judas Traveler, even though he barely appears in the wiki for the story and has kinda nothing to do with clones. Man McNulty from Fansided describes Judas like this, and I quote, "Imagine if pro wrestler Kevin Nash became Marvel's Sorcerer Supreme, got heavy into the works of Friedrich Nietzsche and Carl Jung, and dressed up as though he lived in 19th century Victorian England. In addition, he's accompanied by a quartet of sycophantic groupies called The Host, and often debates with the Grim Reaper from Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal, dubbed the Squire. Oh, and he's also as omnipotent as Q from Star Trek The Next Generation." I wish I was making all that up, but that's actually what that guy said. So that guy that I just described is for some reason wasting his time on the street level Spider-Man, and there is literally no good reason for it. Former Marvel editor Glenn Greenberg has said that pretty much all they knew about Traveler was he was some super powerful psychiatrist studying the true nature of evil for some incredibly vague reason. They eventually just made him a mutant, but also made it so he actually lied about how powerful he actually was, and they also made him just become another of Norman Osborn's lackeys, which seems like a hell of a waste given the potential they had initially given him with his powers. Number 6. The Jackal. Some people just really overstay their welcome. Some people seem really great at first, but then reveal they seem to kinda just suck. The Jackal is both. The Jackal is more so overrated in a publishing sense, as in relation to how much the villain is featured in stories, but no one is asking for that. When he first came on the scene back in 1965, following the death of Norman Osborn, Miles Warren was coming up as the next real major villain for Spider-Man, a villain with a focus on experimenting with biology and cloning. Unfortunately, as the main initiator in that mess that was the Clone Saga, the Jackal lost a lot of good faith, and no matter how much Marvel tries to slick him with a fresh coat of paint and throw him back into the mix, the damage is done. It's upsetting because the character had so much damn potential, and then when he lost it all, no one seemed to really want to give him a proper chance after that. Number 5. Morlun. When Marvel brought on writer J. Michael Straczynski as the writer of Amazing Spider-Man, I don't think anyone realized that it would lead to some of the most controversial moments in the wall crawler's history. One of these moments was the idea that the radioactive science fiction spider which bit Peter Parker was apparently now the emissary of a mystical spider god, making Spider-Man no longer simply a sci-fi created hero, but also a supernatural one. This meant he needed supernatural enemies too. Enter Morlun and the Inheritors. Essentially, Morlun is a vampire, but instead of feasting on blood, Morlun and his family feed off energy from animal god avatars called totems, and spider totems, like Spider-Man in particular, are their favorite. Feasting to extend their already long lives is pretty much all the motivation they really get. People seem to think that Morlun is a pretty unstoppable heavy hitter, despite the fact that he has been defeated and lost his life on multiple occasions. That was all before his family were introduced in the awesome 2014 Spider-Verse event, but this also explained the reason Morlun kept seemingly coming back to life, and it's all because he and his fellow inheritors cloned themselves, which is totally valid for a comic book, but I still think it's kind of a little bit lazy, just a little. While Spider-Verse was very cool, I think Morlun and his fam are just a little bit more hyped up than they really deserve. Number 4. Green Goblin. I know this one's gonna pee off a lot of you people. As the #1 villain of Spider-Man, outside of arguably Dr. Octopus of course, the Green Goblin is bound to be just a tad bit overhyped. But looking into the character a bit more reveals that, holy heck, he totally is overhyped. Norman Osborn's main thing is just trying to ruin Spider-Man's life for interfering in his corporate tomfoolery. It's just one middle-aged, shady but successful businessman's pure hatred of a poor, superpowered teenager. Now, it's fair to say that Norman has been a villain to everyone during Dark Reign, but as in most cases, a lot of the time, Norman is orchestrating events from behind the scenes, sort of. The problem is, Norman has been shoehorned into way too many Spider-Man events that he really had no business being involved in the first place. I'm looking at you, Clone Saga, and it's all because he was the first villain to learn Spider-Man's secret identity and then end the life of his first GF, Gwen Stacy. He has dealt some serious emotional blows to Spider-Man, that is a statement and it is true. But still, the Green Goblin's actual abilities are nothing crazy, the execution of his plans aren't flawless, and Marvel hasn't really done anything super interesting with his character in a long time. And even when they do something, like with the altruistic turn to the Golden Goblin, we all secretly know that the character will return back to his same boring villainous self at some point. Number 3, Cadaverous. While a good share of villains on this list are actually some noteworthy scallywags who have done enough to at least earn their place, Cadaverous is one of Spider-Man's villains that was literally hyped up and did kind of absolutely nothing with it. Well, not entirely. Ivan Renz was an employee of Stark Industries alongside his mentor and Peter Parker's parents. They developed the Key, tech that could potentially bring people back to life. But the experiments failed, sending his mentor to the afterlife. Tony Stark dismantled the unit. Ivan eventually became the supervillain known as Cadaverous, only ever appearing in the J.J. and Henry Abrams written Bloodline Spider-Man storyline from 2019. Mary Jane Watson loses her life to Cadaverous on the 5th page of the first issue after Spider-Man is swarmed and beaten pretty badly by him and his minions. Then Spider-Man just completely quits. 12 years later, the story has a one-armed version of Peter Parker who is now the honestly pretty bad single father of Ben Parker, Peter and Mary Jane's son. After Cadaverous returns out of hiding and kidnaps Peter to use his blood for his evil plans, it's up to the new Spider-Man, Ben Parker, with the help of his friend Faye Ido, and old Tony Stark and Riri Williams to fight Cadaverous and his minions, which includes a cyber zombified team of Avengers. But this is all we ever see of Cadaverous, and we never have seen him since. The man beats Spider-Man and we only ever get a 5-issue story about him. I don't know, I'm just saying. Number 2, Carnage. Carnage has rightfully amassed a huge fan base. He's headlined several comic book miniseries and played a part in some bigger villains events. He even had his own ongoing monthly, but I still think Carnage is also one of Spider-Man's slightly overrated villains. The only reason he exists at all was so Marvel could capitalize off of Venom's popularity during the late 1980s and early 1990s. As a more extreme, red version of Venom, Carnage basically filled in as Marvel went and turned Venom into an anti-hero. After Marvel decided that symbiotes could suddenly asexually reproduce, Carnage was born from Venom, bonding itself to Eddie Brock's cellmate, Cletus Cassidy, who was essentially the Joker, and that's not just me speculating. Eric Larson, the co-creator of Carnage, admitted he just directly copied the Joker and just changed his skin and hair color to create Cassidy. So my point here is that while Carnage is definitely scary, and he has been really cool in his latest stories, he is one part of a ripoff of Batman's best villain, and another part an extreme copy of a much better Spider-Man villain with a fresh coat of paint. I still recommend Absolute Carnage though, I'm just saying. I still recommend it. And finally, in at number 1, Facade. There are a lot of villains who kept their identity secret, with the whole fun of the character being the act of trying to solve the mystery and then being shocked or surprised when it was finally revealed. That last part is kind of an important part of the whole payoff of a mystery, even if it's ultimately kind of a letdown. So needless to say, when a character like Facade, that stands for Full Acclamation Combat and Defense Exploskeleton, shows up hiding his identity, and who to this day has never had his identity revealed, people just stop caring. The billion-dollar Facade suit was created by a pharmaceutical company, which raises a ton of questions on its own, but its inventor was sent to the afterlife by whoever it was that stole the suit. Photographer Lance Bannon did actually get a picture of who stole the suit, but what do you know, in true mystery fashion, the room was too dark to see the face of the criminal. But even then, Facade took Bannon's life just in case. J. Jonah Jameson, Arthur Bryce, and another photographer, Cole Cooper, are all possible suspects, but we will never know because when the suit got destroyed by Spider-Man, the criminal inside the suit still managed to escape without being seen. And then, Marvel had the audacity to have the character willing to divulge his identity to Spider-Man, and Spider-Man decides that he's got more important things to do, and he leaves. What was the point? What was it? I got really emotional.
Coming in at number 10, we've got the Riddler. Of all the supervillains throughout the universe, the Riddler is one of the most consistently interesting. He's an excellent foil for Batman, you know, the world's greatest detective. By setting up intricate puzzles and riddles for Mr. Wayne to solve, he provides all sorts of intrigue. Edward Nygma, what a name by the way, isn't terribly physically strong, nor does he have any sort of energy beam ready to fire. He's just extremely good at deductive reasoning and is able to plan very far ahead using his vast knowledge of eclectic things. He could probably be a master criminal if he wanted to, pulling off heists like no other without ever coming close to being caught. Unfortunately, he has a major weakness. He wants people to solve his riddles. He wants to be found. He's compelled to leave clues behind, pretty much no matter what. There could be a clean getaway right in front of his masked face, and he'd still find a way to leave behind some sort of tip for the folks looking to solve this crime. Really, anytime the Riddler loses, it's his own doing. You have to feel sort of bad for the guy at this point. I'm sure it was fun at first, but now he probably just wants to make a clean getaway and write some mystery novels or something. Maybe someday, Edward. Maybe someday. Coming in at number 9, we've got Thanos. Believe it or not, Thanos has a similar weakness to the Riddler. Sure, he's a gigantic purple powerhouse of a supervillain with a drove of committed lackeys that have crazy powers of their own, but he still fails in the same way as Mr. Nygma. Well, almost the same way. Throughout his various reigns, Thanos manages to take down countless heroes, even without the full power of the Infinity Gauntlet. He's got size, strength, speed, and mastery over all sorts of disciplines. Really, there's no reason for Thanos to fail at whatever he puts his mind to, but he still does somehow. It seems as though he believes that he's unworthy of his own power, therefore making subconscious mistakes and leaving openings for others to thwart his plans. So even if his weakness isn't apparent to those trying to bring him down, he'll lead them to victory somehow. Wow. Coming in at number 8, we've got the Penguin. Remember kids, smoking kills. The Penguin is another villain from the Batman universe who really doesn't have any superpowers per se. What he does have though is ruthless business sense, endless funds, and a whole lot of crazy technology. Plus he's based on a penguin. Incredible stuff really. His genius level intellect and surprising combat skills make him a formidable foe for sure, and that's not even counting his birds. But there's one thing that brings this flightless lad down. It's not an allergy to some sort of supernatural element, nor is it a proclivity for melting when exposed to heat. It's a self-inflicted wound. The Penguin has a weakness for cigarettes. That's right, death sticks, coffin nails. Didn't his mother tell him it was a terrible habit? I suppose he didn't like his parents too much to start with, but still, if there's one weakness that is extra terrible, it has to be one for smoking, even if it is through one of those fancy long-handled opera-style holders. Coming in at number 7, we've got Venom. Eddie Brock has had a rough go, hasn't he? The poor guy lost everything, decided to blame it on Spider-Man, and then got bonded with a symbiotic alien. Well, at least he got some wicked powers out of it. He's got all sorts of superhuman physical abilities, as well as the ability to block out Spidey's spider senses. Add in night vision, venomous fangs, and of course shape-shifting, and you've got a powerful villain slash anti-hero slash whatever else Venom decides to do. But alas, there are a couple of rough weaknesses that make this symbiote hunter a little less effective than he'd be otherwise. Firstly, there's the fact that fire, or really any form of intense heat, really does a number on him. Even a match could prove to be a little too much for poor Venom depending on the circumstances. Fire can be more or less avoided if you're careful though. His other weakness is a little more omnipresent. It's sound. Loud noises can take out the big lad. It really disturbs the alien. And Venom seems to operate largely in New York City, which isn't exactly known for ever being quiet. Tough break, big guy. Coming in at number 6, we've got Electro. Spider-Man, you've got it too easy. All your enemies have weaknesses that are super exploitable. You'd think that a man who can harness the power of electricity would do well, especially in a big city, but it seems as though his spirits are easily dampened. Get it? Hold on. So Electro can generate all sorts of electricity, which is extremely useful when he weaponizes it. He can also propel himself along with electromagnetic energy and even teleport by turning himself into electric current and jumping into wires. That all sounds super great, right? Like it's nice to be Electro, but it's too bad that water can essentially stop him in his sparky tracks. There's the old idea that electricity will travel quickly through water, electrocuting anyone in contact with the liquid. Well, I mean, when it comes to Electro, water will just short circuit him. Womp womp. This wouldn't be too big of an issue, but Electro lives on Earth, you know, the planet covered in water. Coming in at number 5, we've got Red Hulk. After a lifetime of hunting the Hulk, General Thunderbolt Ross decided it was time to take matters into his own hands. His own red hands. Assisted by AIM and the intelligentsia, he becomes a Hulk of his very own, this time more crimson than green, and then he sets out to find and fight the Hulk. The more power he draws, the hotter he gets though, so as he goes harder in the paint, the more likely he is to overheat, and if that happens, it's game over. I suppose that's a weakness most people have. If you fight too hard, you're gonna pass out, but the Red Hulk takes it to a brand new extreme. Coming in at number 4, we've got MODOK. This one might seem obvious, but it's worth mentioning. MODOK, or a mental organism designed only for killing, was once an ordinary man. George Tarleton was a skilled technician who ended up joining AIM. He knew they were a little radical, but not to the extent that he found out later on. The organization altered George into a super intelligent being, which made his dome grow to unheard of sizes, and then realized they should probably give him a way to move around. Thus, the Doomsday Chair was born, carting MODOK around by levitating. He would think circles around everyone, using his brilliant mind, and even had psionic powers, but if he's rendered chairless, it's game over, or if someone turns his power off. Coming in at number 3, we've got Harley Quinn, another genius with an Achilles heel, but Harley's really has nothing to do with her own limitations. She's just a sucker for love. Or manipulation if you look at it objectively. The Joker, while serving time on Arkham, managed to brainwash poor Dr. Quinn. He broke her down and built her back up in his image. She's super smart, super resourceful, and super popular, but she's always got this thorn in her side, Mr. J. When your weakness is an over-dependent relationship with a gaslighting lunatic clown man, you know you've got it rough. Coming at number 2, we've got the Joker. Speaking of lunatic clown men, wow, who would have guessed? The trickster of Gotham, the prince of pranks, the maniac who causes a lot of problems for everyone. He manages to outsmart and outplay all sorts of powerful folks through sheer ingenuity and madness. Because beyond all those crazy gadgets and brainwashed lackeys, the Joker is just a man. And men are weak to bullets, or knives, or being punched through the chest. Finally at number 1, we've got Kingpin. And speaking of men, Kingpin loves his wife a lot. Like enough to make some major mistakes. She does not approve of his criminal lifestyle, but finds herself involved anyways. So when you look to all of the other villains with tragic backstories and Achilles heels the size of Achilles himself, you have to wonder how Kingpin feels. Ask him about his weakness and he'll respond, "My wife." Now you've got all the know-how necessary to take down some of the most dangerous individuals in comics.
Number 10, Zeitgeist. Okay, he didn't actually initially start as a villain. Instead, Axel Cluny was actually the leader of the celebrity superhero mutant group known as X-Force, but after his death and revival, he did indeed become a criminal and villain. Now, Zeitgeist has a pretty unfortunate mutant superpower that first manifested in a very unfortunate incident. Basically, Zeitgeist could spew acidic vomit from his mouth, and he wore a protective mouthpiece in and out of his costume. He discovered this power during a little makeout sesh at a beach where he accidentally vomited and melted the girl's face half off. She did survive, but the real kicker is he can't even remember her name. See, he's not really a good guy at all. It was shown that his vomit could burn through 10cm thick steel in less than 30 seconds. Again, not a horrible power, just really unfortunate. Number 9, Armless Tiger Man. Gustav Hertz worked in a mechanical laboratory in Munich, Germany during the 1940s. Now one day, his arms were caught in a machine and were amputated. Surviving the experience and given reading material on how to operate day to day using his mouth and feet, Hertz developed skill in using his teeth and his feet in place of his amputated arms. He has sharpened his teeth into fangs to use as weapons and has above average strength, allowing him to bend steel with his mouth. His toes are also very dexterous, allowing him to throw daggers with them, which is actually kind of cool in a little bit of a weird way. He was an enemy of the World War II hero Angel, which is not Warren Worthington. He was also an enemy of Wakanda, and after death, he even came into sort of indirect conflict with Hercules. That's cool. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this video and you haven't already, make sure to press that subscribe button to join us here at Top 10 Nerd. We're almost at 1.30 million subscribers, so definitely get on that. Number 8, The Living Eraser. The Living Eraser is no mere man, you earthbound fools. Sorry, I love that quote from this character, it's kind of hilarious. Kutsa here is actually a Thalumian, and he was the agent of the Supremacy, and as an agent he would use his Dimensionalizer to kidnap scientists for nefarious designs. Ooh. The Living Eraser's Dimensionalizer can transport people to other dimensions, primarily between Earth and Dimension Z. As the Dimensionalizer passes over a surface, surface, it turns it invisible, making it appear as if the victim is being erased. When the entire surface has been transformed, the being or object is transported across dimensions to its destination. If he literally erased people, it would be way more scary, but sending them to another dimension is a fixable thing in comics, so it's not exactly the worst. Number 7. Boomerang, but from Marvel. Fred Myers was born in Australia, but moved to America when he was a small child. Now in America, his great love was baseball, and he developed an extraordinary pitching arm. He became a professional baseball player in the minor leagues after graduating high school, and a few years later entered into the major leagues. Within a year though, he was suspended for accepting bribes. Now with an arm like that and no job, he was eventually contracted by the subversive criminal organization, the Secret Empire, and offered employment. They designed special weaponry for him to exploit his pitching ability, and he became their special operative, codenamed Boomerang. Now why Boomerang specifically and not like, I don't know, a baseball? Because he was born in Australia and that is the only projectile they have in that country, obviously. Number 6. Count Vertigo. Now you listen here, okay? Count Werner Vertigo is of royal blood. He is an heir to the throne of Vlatava, truly the most prestigious of titles, okay? But don't you think for one second that means he has cool superpowers, because he doesn't. Count Vertigo has a hereditary inner ear defect that affected his balance. That's not a superpower. Vertigo had a small electronic device implanted in his right temple though that compensated this problem. Tinkering with that device, Vertigo learned he was able to affect other people's balance as well, distorting their perception so that they literally could not tell up from down, which is an effect known as vertigo, and he used this skill to fight Green Arrow. He'd also use it to join up with the Suicide Squad and checkmate, using his powers to make people dizzy to his advantage. Very nice. Number 5. Codpiece. Personally, I would have loved to be a fly on the wall when the character of Codpiece was conceived. Codpiece is honestly just a guy with a massive inferiority complex. That's what it says on his wiki though. I didn't make that up. Okay? Look, in high school, a girl told him he wasn't tall enough, but he thought she meant something else, and so instead of getting like a broken muffler or giant wheels on a giant truck, Codpiece created a suit that had a Codpiece multi-weapon built into the crotch area. The Codpiece had a wide variety of functions, including a cannon, missiles, a sonic attack, 2 retractable boxing gloves, and a variety of tools such as drills and scissors. If there is one way to compensate, it is by becoming a multi-tool. Look, he's doing the best with what he's got, okay? Number 4. Polka-Dot Man. While this character got a bit of a change up in the recent Suicide Squad movie, Polka-Dot Man, real name Abner Krill, in the comics didn't have a power. He instead wore a suit that was covered in different colored polka dots. When these polka dots were attached to the suit, they had no function, but once they were pulled off, they would enlarge and turn into different gimmicky weapons, like flying buzzsaws, blinding sun-shaped dots, dots that turned into fist-shaped projectiles, and even one that turned into a portal. That sounds kind of cool. The dots would even self-destruct to prevent anyone from studying the tech. The only problem was that the polka dot gadgets and the electronic suit were expensive to maintain, and Krill was just literally unable to afford it sometimes. The struggle is real, man. I feel you. Number 3. Paste Pot Pete. 1963's Strange Tales number 104 states, Human Torch battles the most fantastic foe of all, Paste Pot Pete and his unbeatable super weapon. Now said unbeatable super weapon just happened to be a glue gun that fired an extremely adhesive multi-polymer liquid that he invented. Paste Pot Pete, otherwise known as Peter Petruski or even Trapster, created a not hot glue gun, and his idea was to use this to commit crimes. As you can imagine, the Human Torch really had no problems whatsoever taking down old Pete here, and he continued to do so multiple times because Pete does not know when to give up, apparently. Number 2. Kite Man. Kite Man. Hell yeah. Now riddle me this, nerds. What good are powers like reality warping, energy projection, telekinesis, and super strength against a guy who flies around on a giant kite? Yeah, I'd like to see the Justice League take on Charles Brown and his giant kite. There's no way anyone could possibly stand against that. No sir. Not at all. Kite Man possessed a variety of gimmicked kites, including a jet-powered hang glider that allowed for quick escapes, a mammoth kite that the Kite Man used to shuttle criminals out of Gotham's prison, a flashbulb kite, and a trap net kite. Although, in more recent times, he did temporarily possess the powers of Titans, those abilities pale in comparison to the might of a good kite at your side though. And in at number 1 is Ten-Eyed Man. Okay, it's a DC writer's room. You and your buds are sitting around the table. You need a villain, but someone different, someone unique, someone who could pose a threat to the caped crusader. A villain that requires intelligence to beat, some could say. Then all of a sudden, Frank stands up. I've got it! We take away a man's ability to see, and instead, his vision will come from his fingertips. 5 eyes on each hand. A brief moment of silence follows as the genius that would become Philip Reardon, the 10-eyed man, has just been created. That is his only power, and as you can imagine, this does pose some problems. For starters, his regular eyes are blind. Also, he is often easily defeated simply by injuring his very sensitive eye fingers, which can be done by tricking him into catching or touching something, or even theoretically giving him a high five. But let's not forget, it has been shown he can only be kept in a jail cell by keeping his hands locked in a special non-see-through box, because with eyes on his fingers, quote, escape would be child's play for him. It's true.
Coming in number 10, we have Shocker. I think back when this villain was created, the idea of having someone who had vibrations as their superpower would have been a little bit harder to make fun of. Now, many of you probably know Shocker. He has had a few moments in the sun, popping up in video games, and he even has a moment as one of the henchmen of the Vulture. Now you think someone who is canon in the MCU wouldn't fit onto this list, but when we break him down, we start to learn that Shocker isn't that shocking. It would seem that this villain has a knack for losing to Spider-Man every single time, and it's probably because his powers aren't that impressive. He can make shockwaves that blast through the air, and he can make vibration shields. Yeah, I'm not that impressed by what you have to offer. In recent years, we have seen less and less of this punchline of a villain, as I think the writers have seen that his time has come, and he will soon be put to bed. As a kid, I always got him and Electro mixed up because I thought Shocker meant that he was electrocuting people because he was shocking them. Well, at least for the new generation, you won't have those problems because this guy is going to be gone pretty soon. Coming in at number 9, we have White Rabbit. I mean, right when we start breaking down this villain, you will learn why she is on this list. It's one thing to be a down and out loser who's had enough of the cruel world and now wants to dive into a world of crime because everything else has let them down. But when you come from a rich family and you turn to crime just for the sake of being angsty, then I don't really have much compassion for you, and your character isn't really relatable. The White Rabbit, also known as Lorena Dodson, built her persona off the Alice in Wonderland book. She thought that would be a cool and edgy way to get into the world of crime. I think she just indulged in too many psychedelics and maybe went off the deep end. I wouldn't be surprised if this character was inspired by the rise of LSD in the 80s when this character was birthed. In terms of powers, she has zero. All she has is a bad attitude and a general understanding of martial arts. She's not a villain that any of us are clamoring for. Coming in at number 8, we have Mindworm. You know, for some of these villains, it seems that the writers went to so much work to really come up with someone who was interesting and had motivations for evil, but then they just throw them in the toilet, and that's what really happens with Mindworm. Mindworm starts off great. He has powers from birth. He's some sort of mutant kid with a huge head. Of course, he's weird and kids don't like him, but at least his parents love his huge cranium. But what Mindworm doesn't know is that he's feeding off the psionic energy of his parents, draining their brain. Eventually, he gets too greedy with this and he kills his own mother and father. He didn't mean to do this. He was just a young mutant kid who didn't know any better, and now he was an orphan. From there, he was bullied in the orphanage and he learns how to use his powers. Eventually, he grows up and is living in a New York apartment where he's feeding off all the people in the building and getting pretty strong off this. But Spider-Man moves in and he senses that someone's trying to suck out his brain energy. The two have a clash and Mindworm is killed by some gang members. Like, all of that work into building up who this guy is, and he was gone just like that. What a waste. Coming in at number 7, we have Gibbon. We got back-to-back orphanage stories for you. In fact, this one sounds like a cross between Mindworm and Robin. Gibbon is basically the missing link. He has all the abilities of a chimp that are amplified way up. He's got super strength, speed, awareness, reflexes. This guy is off the charts when you're talking about his Madden stats. But because of his monkey-like ways, the kids didn't really like him in the orphanage, and he was never adopted. Now, this ended with him growing up and leaving like a regular dude, but now he was just a freak with no money, so he decided he could use his mutations to make some cash. And what's the best way for an oddity to make a quick buck? Well, the circus, of course. There you would think he would be among his people, but he was rejected once again, and now he turned to a life of villainy. When we first see Gibbon, he's just a dude that has some monkey skills, but in later renditions of his character, he looks like a full-on ape man. And even though he has the abilities to take down Spidey, the the clashes between the two always end up with Gibbon on his butt. Coming in at number 6 we have The Answer. Now this guy is actually pretty cool. He's just used in a very lame way and his name sucks. The Answer was already a skilled assassin. He was working for the mob boss of all mob bosses, Wilson Fisk. Anyone Fisk wanted taken down, he was all over it. And part of why he was so good at his job was because The Answer, at this time he was known as Aaron Nichols, is extremely intelligent. He showcases genius level problem solving skills and he can come up with the answer to any problem. And this is all before he ever gets any sort of superpowers. There was a time in comics when the Kingpin was just handing out superpowers, but you don't give the first powers to someone you can't trust, so he of course gave his first dose of super juice to his buddy Aaron. But at first glance nothing happened, which is probably a relief and a bummer, because if you take some sort of experimental drug to give yourself powers, you want to get the superpowers, but you also don't want to come out a freak. But later the Answer learns that he has one of the most powerful superpowers I have ever heard of. No matter what the situation, when he is faced with a conflict, his body will supply him with the powers to counter who or whatever he's fighting. So normally he's just a guy, but when the time calls for it, he can fly or create force fields or get super strength. But after a run-in with Spidey that he wins, the character just kind of disappears and we don't see him that much. This guy fits on this list because of the wasted potential. Coming in at number 5 we have Kangaroo. I brought this up in the first video. If you're a villain or a hero and you're choosing your power, you don't have to pick something lame. It seems like some of these villains focus way too much on the branding of their super persona rather than the powers. With Kangaroo, it seemed that the villain was set on theming themselves after kangaroos rather than having a cool power. He has implants in his legs that allow him to jump very far, and he's also a skilled boxer. Like, not the worst combination of things, but when you're hell bent on taking out Spidey by stomping on him, you're probably going to lose a lot. There was this weird time in the 70s and 80s where Australia was this thing that the media was trying to push. It was foreign, it was interesting, no one really knew how to sell it. The closest that we got was Crocodile Dundee. But this villain seems like the big wigs at Marvel wanted to make an Australian themed villain because they thought kids would like it, rather than thinking of a good character first. Coming in at number 4 we have The Swarm. Have you guys seen that episode of South Park where they make a joke that the writers from Family Guy are just manatees in a tank and they all pull out 3 random topics to base an episode around? Well, that's what The Swarm feels like. They were like, German scientists, killer bees, purple cape. This dude is lame, not only because he's a swarm of bees that is being controlled by a dead scientist's consciousness, but also because this dude gets beat by bug repellent. When him and Spidey face off, Spidey's able to beat him by spraying down his suit in bug spray, and then the swarm literally can't get close enough to fight and has to run away. If your weakness can be purchased at Home Depot, then you're a pretty lame villain if you ask me. Coming in at number 3 we have Grizzly. I like how in the Marvel universe, if you're a bear enthusiast, you'll eventually get superpowers and become one of the lamest villains that Peter Parker has to fight on a semi-regular basis. But if you're a bear enthusiast in real life, you just get eaten by bears. 2 very different outcomes. Well, Maxwell Markham was just that, a dude who loves bears, and get this, he was also a wrestler who hurt his fellow wrestlers too much, so he got kicked out of the league. We got a dude who loves bears, he used to be a wrestler. What's the third thing that's going to set this guy into the manatee formula? Oh, he was also given a bear suit that would hook him up with some superpowers. Where did he get this suit? Well, he got it from the Jackal, who's one of Spider-Man's best villains, but that dude has a lot of dud moves. I feel like the Jackal just wakes up some days and is like, what if I gave a dude a bear suit so he thought he was a real villain and then Spider-Man would have to deal with it? That would be jokes. Some of his plots sound more like pranks than actual schemes to cause mayhem. Coming in at number 2 we have Hypno Hustler. Next we have a villain that not only has a lame weakness, but their powers were used to such a small scale that doesn't really make any sense why this character was ever made. Hypno Hustler is Anthony Del Soen, and he has music that can take over your mind. His songs allow him to control people around him and then they do his bidding. But the thing is, if he hears his own music, he will also become hypnotized. He can't even handle his own groovy music, which seems strange. I've never heard of a hypnotist hypnotizing themselves. But when we first see Hypno Hustler, he's shaking people down for just their pocket change at a show. I feel like this guy should have had bigger dreams. If he got one of his songs on the radio, he could have taken over the world. And coming at the number 1 spot we have Humbug. Here's the thing, when you hear that there's a hero based off a spider, that's kinda cool because at least spiders are scary, they make web, they do some interesting things. But when you hear there's a villain that just has a general insect theme, you can throw that one in the trash. I really couldn't dislike this villain more. For one, he should be able to beat Spider-Man because he's got a super suit that gives him skills that are on par with the web slinger. But this guy has the worst weakness of all, a love for bugs. He loves bugs so much that Spider-Man has been able to halt this guy from a life of crime by telling him he's going to smash some cockroaches. Like, dude, give your head a shake.